To that story, so many families have been devastated by the loss of a loved one killed in a motorcycle crash. We've had conversations in our newsroom that it seems we're covering more and more of these. And now a new study backs up that assumption. QuoteWizard says that since 2019, deaths by motorcycle crash have increased by 47% in this state. It's the fifth biggest increase nationwide. In 2020 alone, 200 motorcyclists were killed statewide. QuoteWizard also found a fatality rate of 5 deaths per 10,000 motorcycle owners, an alarming rate. Meanwhile, helmet use has apparently decreased, going from about 77% down to 70%. Joining us live right now is Nick VinZant. He is a Senior Research Analyst at QuoteWizard, which put together this data. And Nick, it is troubling when you hear about this. Hard to believe that, it's jumped so much considering, we were in the pandemic for so much of that period. What have you learned as you kind of been digging into these numbers and what we should know about your findings?
Well, the difficult news is that it looks like it's actually getting even worse than what we originally put together in the study. We found that nationwide, we've seen an 11% increase in motorcycle deaths since 2019. 2019 and 2020 are the most recent statistical numbers available. But when we look at New York specifically, we saw that 47% increase, like you mentioned. And when we look at preliminary numbers for 2021, it seems that the number of deaths is likely to go even higher, up another 11%. So there we would be looking at more than a 20% increase since 2019. Motorcycle deaths right now are at the highest level they have ever been.
The numbers are one thing. The reason behind it is another. I know obviously there can be a variety of factors, and we've reported on so many of these crashes. You have, user error, the weather, road conditions, road rage, medical incidents. What does the study say, though, about how alcohol factors into this and what other factors are really in play in a number of these crashes?
So we're seeing a number of different factors, alcohol, like you mentioned, and then we're kind of seeing a carryover from the pandemic. What we found in regards to overall traffic deaths, and this is also true for motorcycles, is that this started really when the pandemic began. And we found that an overall pattern, every case is different, but an overall pattern of younger drivers going too fast on less congested roadways. That's really what emerged during the pandemic. What has been troubling, and while I think we continue to see these numbers be so high, is that those driving patterns and habits that were established during the pandemic when there was less congested roadways have now continued to today, where now we have those driving habits from the less congested roadways that are now continuing on very congested, normally congested roadways. And that's why we're seeing these deaths just continue to really increase and increase and increase as we move forward.
As we were going over this at the top of the show, we mentioned some of the stats that you've come up with, and the other one is about helmet use, which sadly is going in the wrong direction as well. The number of people wearing these potentially life-saving helmets decreased. How big of a factor is that? And I guess, you wonder why we're seeing that change out there as well.
That's something that we haven't really been able to figure out exactly why helmet use has started to decline. But it has declined nationwide. It has declined in the New York region. People went from 77% to 70%. It has declined in the Midwest. There are certain regions of the country that helmet use has declined, and it's difficult to put exactly a reason as to why that is. What we do know, though, for sure, is that helmet use does save lives. A 40% reduction in the number of fatal injuries and a 70% reduction in the number of serious injuries. So helmet use is absolutely something that people can do to protect themselves, but people aren't wearing them as much.
So you talk about the importance of helmet use, and that obviously could help reverse this trend of how many deadly crashes that we're seeing. What else, as people think about, solutions and how to turn around this trend, what do you think needs to change?
We need to go back to the way that we were driving before the pandemic started. When we look at this going all the way back to when records were first being kept, traffic fatalities and motorcycle fatalities were declining and have been declining since the 1970s. It's just been in the last 2 years that it has suddenly started to go up. Initially, we really thought that this was going to be an initial blip, that this was just a pandemic-related thing really early in the pandemic, and that trend would reverse itself, but it hasn't. And it seems to be not only not reversing itself, but getting worse, because we saw deaths go up from 2018 to 2019, from 2019 to 2020, and now it looks like it's going to be going up again. So the thing is, it's just that advice that we've always heard: slow down, be careful, drive sober, wear a helmet.
You know, Nick, just recently, one of our digital producers kind of just went through our archives and chronicled how many of these sad stories that we've covered over the past half year or year. And we certainly noticed that there's been this big uptick, and we were thinking, who do you talk to about this? How do you get some answers and kind of quantify this and figure out what's going on? So your insight has been very valuable. Nick VinZant is with QuoteWizard, who put this together. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's an important story.
Absolutely.